Wow, I really wish that I could have tuned in and heard all the suggestions you've just talked about how God has been at work already, because he knew this was coming. And if he loved us, he was going to do stuff to prepare us, and I think he has been. One of the things that happened recently for me, as the regional minister for this area, I started contacting the other pastors just simply by text and just saying, hi, how you going? How are you coping with COVID-19 stuff? And they would reply back. One of those pastors had been diagnosed a couple of months ago with a reasonably serious cancer. And so on the end of his, it was, hi, how you going? How are you doing with the COVID-19 stuff? And mate, how are you going with your treatment? A few minutes later, I got a phone call back from him. And his response to that question was, it's fantastic, Pete. He said, God has been preparing us. This time is so exciting. It wasn't kind of the response I've been getting from a number of pastors, and certainly someone suffering from cancer, but he was just over the moon. And let me tell you a little bit about his story. I did ask permission to do that. First of all, when he was diagnosed with cancer and he was told he was going to start chemo or the various treatments, he knew that he physically wouldn't be up to carrying the church at the same level of pastoral care and pastoral responsibility. So they had prepared their whole church to function well in his absence. He said, mate, we are set up to look after ourselves, to look after sermons, to look after the various things and to care for one another. He said, we didn't imagine we'd do it online, but we were already prepared, which was great to hear. He also talked about the use of technology, and they used Zoom meetings. And he said it was great. He said we had people interacting on Sunday morning. We had people reading the Bible. We shared communion all at the same time in our own homes. And then he said this interesting thing. He said, we now have 120 people who listen to the sermon or to the service. And I was scratching my head because their church only has about 70 people. And then he told me this story. He said, because we recorded the Zoom meeting, he said, we've got some connections with the local nursing home. And they just found a live streamed channel on Sunday morning and played it. And they said, it didn't really work for us. So he said, I'll send you our recorded session of what we did on Sunday. And they played that for the nursing home and it went through the roof. The people were talking about it 2 days later. And the key thing was, it wasn't just some other person doing church. The people knew the people on screen and they knew the people who were taking part. And so now that whole nursing home tunes in on a Sunday morning to watch their service. So they suddenly have a bigger audience than they ever had before. So he was really excited about that. And the third area that he was excited about, he said, we're seeing people find new ways to minister. And he told the story. He said, we've got one guy who's 91 years old. He said, so we had to show him how to use Zoom. And he got it first up. He got it on the computer and he listened to the service. He got so excited that he decided he could set up Zoom meetings. Now, just a step back. Last year, his wife passed away. She passed away after an extended time where she was a member of the nursing home. And over the year or the 2 years leading up to her death, he would regularly visit her in the nursing home and he built lots of friendships. So now this 91-year-old man, new to technology, is using Zoom meetings to meet with people in the nursing home that have shut their doors to outside visitors. Now that's creative, and I can understand why my friend was so excited about what God is doing. And that's just one example of God preparing beforehand us or the church for the coronavirus, because he knew it was coming, because he's all-knowing and he's intentional. before the creation of time. Psalm 139 tells us that he knows all the days of our lives, what will be involved before we're even born. They're all written in his book, they say. And when we look at our church, I think we can find some similar stories. So we are now going to have to go to smaller groups of people, and we've been training small group pastors because we knew that in the future we would set up small groups. And so we have a group of people that are nearly through their training, all ready to go to minister to smaller groups of people. We didn't envisage that they might be online groups, but it's an easy transition. So I see God's hand in that. We'd also decided that it was time to update the directory. And with this current situation, we've said, well, let's fast track that so that people have a connection, a photograph, and someone to pray for. Some churches are just handing out their directory and saying, pray for the person, one above you in the directory and one below you in the directory. I'm not sure that we'll do that system, but it's creative pastoral care and connection. I also see, many of you know that John O'Murray finished his employed role with the Christian school back in February in order to take up a university course. There were some delays which meant that he couldn't start at the beginning of that semester. And I just think that that's God's provision as well, because Jono has been so instrumental in helping us with technology and getting things up and moving forward. And rather than him being drowned with an added load onto the leadership work he does, he's actually got some time. I also personally see the timing of Les Hastings' funeral. If Les had died a month later, there would have been 5 people at his funeral, instead of the 70 or 80 people that gathered to a wonderful celebration. His own family couldn't have attended his funeral. And I just see God's hand of timing and gracious response in that as well. And finally, you can see behind me in our vision statement, which was created about 3 years ago. It wasn't created when I was here, but that vision statement can be fully lived out without having to meet on a Sunday as a large group. We can pray faithfully, we can connect intentionally, and we can reach out in love. And I look back and say, God knew what was coming. He gave us something that wasn't about just a weekly gathering, as precious as that is. And we'll look forward to that when we're through these times. So, there is no doubt in my mind that God has been preparing us for this time in ways beyond what we can dream or imagine, as Ephesians says. Another verse to add in to this current situation is from Romans 8:28. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. So on top of God knowing and preparing us, we also know that he can take this present situation and bring things of wonder and grace. And there are so many stories that are going around of the good things that are emerging. But rather than me just tell you a list of those, we're going to stop the video once again. And this time the question is, what are some of those good things that you see God doing in this present stage?